Okay, let's unpack this. We're going to tackle one of the most fundamental questions in political thought.
A really provocative one, too.
Absolutely. It's this: who should hold the reins of power?
And for centuries, one answer has kept coming back again and again.
The idea that the finest, the most virtuous, maybe the most knowledgeable among us, the best, should be the ones to rule. This idea is, of course, aristocracy.
And that's the core tension we're exploring. We are doing a deep analysis of aristocracy, drawing from a really fascinating source essay that synthesizes all this historical thought.
It traces the idea from the classical world all the way to modern ethics.
Right. And before we really get into the weeds, it's probably worth just a quick structural note. What you're experiencing is a unique two-host AI conversation, and it's powered by Google's Notebook LM.
The whole point is to allow for a deeper, more dynamic analysis of the essay.
Exactly.
So our mission here is to give you a kind of shortcut to being deeply informed about these foundational ideas of governance, but with a real focus on the ethical tests.
And the practical ones.
Right. And the essay we're using, it immediately forces us to confront this central, unavoidable double question.
It's a question that really defines whether any so-called aristocracy succeeds or fails.
First, who truly counts as the best? And second,
By what standard can their rule be justified to the vast majority who are not part of that ruling few?
this isn't just a history lesson. It's really an investigation into that constant inherent tension between merit and, well, raw power.
I mean, every society, right, it doesn't matter if you call it a monarchy or a democracy, every society struggles with what the proper role of expertise and meritocracy should be.
So understanding aristocracy, it's understanding the root of that very struggle.
It is.
To navigate this, we really have to start with precision, with the language itself.
The vocabulary of rule.
Exactly. Our source draws on the Syntopicon, which is this great compilation of the great ideas of Western thought, and the definition it provides is so crisp.
What is it?
Aristocracy names the recurring claim that the few who are best ought to rule.
That core claim immediately sets up a contest.
A contest. How so?
Well, aristocracy is positioned as this distinct ideal. It's set against kingship.
The rule of one.
Right. And democracy, the rule of the many. A definition itself is aspirational.
We have to remember the literal Greek meaning.
We do. Aristoi means best, and kratos means power or rule.
The rule of the best.
Simple as that.
And this emphasis on best, it means the entire ideal rests on the quality of virtue or merit.
Right. If the rulers aren't superior in some demonstrable way, ethically, intellectually, the whole system just fails the test before it even gets started.
That's the philosophical position anyway.
But the historical reality, the sociological reality, it complicates things immediately.
How?
The source reminds us that while the ideal rests on virtue, in practice, what history shows us is that birth and property have persistently stood in for virtue.
Ah, okay. So the moment the ruling class defines best as richest or, most noble by birth,
the entire philosophical structure just collapses.
it collapses because the justification changes. It's no longer about serving the common good through superior wisdom.
It just becomes self-serving privilege.
And that is the central vulnerability that philosophers were trying to solve, or at least stabilize.
Exactly. And to understand how they tried to stabilize it, we need to quickly get a handle on the intellectual framework they were using.
You mean the classical Greek classification of government?
The politeia, yes. It was crucial for them.
Okay. It's a structure based on two things, right? The number of rulers.
And crucially, the intention behind their rule. Aristocracy is classified as one of these basic constitutions describing the rule of the few.
So let's recap the three primary ideal types, the ones where rulers are actually trying to aim for the common welfare.
First is monarchy, the rule of one person.
Second is aristocracy, the rule of the few or the best.
And third is democracy, which in this specific context means the rule of the many, but acting for the common good.
And here's where it gets really, really interesting. If aristocracy means rule by actual merit, by people who are truly superior, how did thinkers like Plato and Aristotle come up with mechanisms to enforce that?
How do you stop it from just instantly slipping into rule by sheer power?
Or what we would just call an oligarchy.
That mechanism, that attempt to institutionalize virtue and knowledge, became the defining project of early political philosophy. And to see that ambition in its most extreme form, we have to look at Plato.
Plato's radical prescription.
Yes.
So Plato's approach, which you see mostly in his Republic, it isn't just some casual endorsement of aristocracy. It's a blueprint.
A design for a purified surgical meritocracy. He defines it as rule by philosopher guardians.
And what's so critical to understand is how systematic this class is. These guardians aren't just, born into it.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
They're a small, highly specialized class. They're selected and trained over many, many years.
Starting in childhood.
Right. From childhood through this intense physical, musical, and philosophical education. This isn't inherited rule. It's a grueling, lifelong commitment.
And the ultimate justification for their absolute authority is just as rigorous. It's not based on military strength.
Or wealth.
Right. Their power is derived entirely from their ability to grasp the form of the good.
We should probably unpack that phrase, the form of the good. For Plato, this isn't just subjective opinion or some political ideology.
Well, it's objective.
It's the objective, eternal truth about justice, beauty, and order. The philosopher guardian is the only one who has achieved this superior knowledge. It's a vision of reality that goes way beyond mere earthly politics.
So their rule is justified because they possess a superior knowledge of what is truly right and good for the city.
It's an appeal to objective truth in governance.
Plato basically argues, why would you let someone without medical training perform surgery? So by that same logic, why would you allow people who are ignorant of the ultimate nature of justice to govern the state? The philosopher guardian is the only true expert.
And this expert rule has a singular, selfless purpose.
Which is?
The guardians govern entirely for the common benefit of the whole city, not for their own gain.
And to enforce this, Plato designed these radical anti-corruption measures. They're probably the most famous and maybe shocking parts of the Republic.
Let's detail them, because they really show the extreme psychological commitment Plato was demanding to prevent that slide into oligarchy.
Okay, so the guardians live communally, and they are forbidden from holding any private wealth at all.
They're housed together, they eat together, and crucially, they have no private families.
None. They share partners, and their children are raised communally without even knowing who their biological parents are.
And that system is designed to remove the two greatest motivators for self-interest and corruption in politics.
The desire for personal material gain.
And the desire to establish a dynastic legacy for one's own children.
So they're essentially stripped of their personal identity as we would understand it.
Right. The only thing left to motivate them is the pursuit of justice and the common good of the polis, the city. It's a kind of pure philosophical asceticism applied to governance.
The analysis here is that Plato saw those two things, property and family, as the inevitable seeds of corruption.
He did. If you want a ruler who is truly dedicated to the common good, you have to eliminate the possibility of selfish interests that come from wealth or dynastic ambition.
The second a guardian claims private property or favors their own child, they lose their justification to rule.
But isn't stripping away private life and family, isn't that inherently dehumanizing, regardless of the goal?
That is the big question. Is this really rule by the best, or is it rule by the highly programmed and isolated? It feels like an incredibly brittle system.
It's reliant entirely on the sustained, almost superhuman virtue of this small, emotionally starved elite.
That's the barrier. And Plato understood that. He argued that the philosopher is already naturally disposed to seek justice over pleasure, but the system is there to support that disposition.
But the fragility is real.
Oh, absolutely. Plato's system is a theoretical construction. It's an ideal form. He acknowledges that if the guardians ever tire of the job, or if that rigorous selection process fails even once,
the state immediately degenerates.
Right, into a timocracy, then oligarchy, and eventually tyranny or democracy.
So their power, it rests entirely on this superior knowledge, which is a stark contrast to modern systems rooted in popular consent.
Totally. The guardian's power does not come from popular election.
Or inherited rank.
It's the ultimate rejection of the popular will as a source of truth. Plato was deeply skeptical of democracy.
He believed the majority, swayed by emotion and a lack of training, would never vote for what was truly good, only for what felt immediately pleasing or advantageous.
It's like the difference between asking the patient who should operate versus allowing only the certified surgeon to operate.
That's a great analogy.
But the critical difference here is that in Plato's system, the surgeon also chooses all the hospital rules, the procedures, and even defines what health actually means.
And that fragility you mentioned, that's exactly what Aristotle, Plato's most famous student, tried to address.
Right. He shifted the focus from utopian idealism to practical classification.
Aristotle took a fundamentally different approach, more empirical.
Instead of designing the perfect state in theory,
he cataloged hundreds of existing constitutions to see what actually worked in the real world. His approach gave us a systematic framework that formalizes that critical distinction between the true ideal of aristocracy and its corrupt form, oligarchy.
Aristotle's genius was in creating this six-part schema of government. It's categorized not just by the number of rulers, but really by the moral intent or the purpose of their rule.
And that framework is essential. I mean, it underlies all subsequent political thought.
So let's lay out his typology. There are three correct forms, right? The ones ruling for the common good of the whole community.
First, there's monarchy, the virtuous rule of one.
Then aristocracy, the virtuous rule of the few.
And then politeia.
And we should pause on politeia. It's often just vaguely translated as republic or constitutional government.
It's more specific than that. Politeia is Aristotle's practical ideal. It's the rule of the many, but specifically the rule of the middle class for the common good.
It's often called a mixed constitution because it tries to blend the stability and merit of the few with the freedom and consensus of the many.
It's the practical, stable middle ground.
And for each of those three correct forms, Aristotle identified a corrupted version?
Right, where the rulers are just serving their own self-interest.
Yeah.
Where governance becomes exploitation.
So the three corrupt forms are tyranny,
The rule of one for self-interest.
oligarchy,
The rule of the few for self-interest, which he almost always defined as the rule of the rich.
and finally democracy, which Aristotle, he viewed it negatively in this context.
And we really have to emphasize that negative definition of democracy because it can confuse modern readers.
Right. Aristotle's corrupt democracy isn't a constitutional republic. It's the specific rule of the poor majority for their own class interest.
It often leads to things like confiscating property from the rich and neglecting justice for the wealthy minority.
It's basically class warfare.
Exactly. So for Aristotle, the line that separates success from failure, aristocracy from oligarchy, is that crucial one, the distinction between virtue and wealth.
So the question is, if a few people are they ruling because they are the wisest and most virtuous?
Or just because they're the richest?
True aristocracy, then, requires a genuinely high standard of character and merit, and it has to be applied impartially. It's ruling for the common welfare.
While oligarchy is the inevitable degeneration, it's when the few rule solely for their own advantage, defining the ruling class by property.
So the minute the wealthy stop governing the entire city and start governing, say, their own stock portfolios,
They stop being aristocrats and become oligarchs. The form might look identical, but the moral content is completely reversed.
that raises a really interesting point. For Aristotle, the number of rulers is less important than the commitment to justice.
Yes, aristocracy and oligarchy might have the exact same structure, a small group making decisions. But the aristocratic form requires a moral dedication that the oligarchical one fundamentally lacks.
And the source essay makes it really clear that the perpetual challenge for any state with a ruling elite is preventing that elite from replacing the abstract standard of best with the concrete reality of richest.
The rich are always tempted to justify their rule by claiming that their resources automatically prove their merit, a claim Aristotle systematically pairs apart.
It's just fascinating how systematic Aristotle was. He was really trying to find a stable solution to this tension between the few and the many, between virtue and wealth.
And the sheer volume of material you'd need to synthesize to get these nuanced theories, differentiating between ideal regimes and their corrupted mirror images, and then proposing a practical, stable alternative like politeia. It's why structured analysis is so essential for the learner. And this process of synthesizing and rationalizing complex, often dense philosophical essays is exactly what we focus on. You can find more of the structured, rational analysis, including AI analysis, summaries, and critiques, by checking out Mindful Moments. That's our YouTube channel.
It's all about inspiring reflection and rational thought. We distill these massive texts down to their most critical insights.
So you can grasp the core concepts quickly.
That focus on structure is vital, especially as we move out of the classical era and into the practical politics of, say, the Roman Republic and later modern states.
The question wasn't just, what's the best form of government? It became, how can we create a government that actually lasts without collapsing into tyranny or class warfare?
And the most common answer, heavily influenced by Aristotle, was through blending.
Yes, the mixed constitution.
Once these core concepts of aristocracy were established, later thinkers just kept revisiting the idea whenever they debated how to balance representation, merit, and equality.
Which led directly to the advocacy of mixed constitutions.
This is maybe the most enduring legacy of aristocratic thought. These systems are explicitly defended because they try to blend aristocratic elements
The stability and wisdom of the few,
with popular
the
participation.
legitimacy and freedom of the many.
And you see this so clearly in the design of many historical and contemporary governments. Think about the Roman Senate.
It was an explicitly aristocratic body.
Right, designed to provide continuity and long-term strategic thinking to balance the popular assemblies.
Or look at modern constitutional design, especially upper legislative chambers like the U.S. Senate or the historical British House of Lords.
Those institutions were deliberately intended to provide a measure of insulation, a bit of wisdom, some long-term planning,
The supposed aristocratic virtues.
all to temper the potentially volatile or short-sighted decisions made by a purely democratic lower house, which might get swept up by some temporary passion.
So in a sense, they're trying to institutionalize Aristotle's ideal of the wise few, but without needing Plato's dehumanizing rigor.
These structures often rely on things like indirect elections, higher age qualifications for office, or lifetime appointments.
All acting as aristocratic checks on pure democracy.
The hope is that the best, most experienced people will naturally rise to that insulated level and fulfill the original ideal.
But these blending attempts, they faced an immediate and powerful critique that still defines political debate today.
Which is the attack on aristocratic rule as merely a mask.
A mask for class domination, or just entrenched, unearned power.
And this is where that opening double question comes back with a vengeance. If the ruling best, the ones appointed to the insulated Senate or the High Court, are always drawn from the same small pool of inherited wealth and connections,
And the whole idea just collapses.
the critique is that aristocracy is just the pretty noble name that the rich give to their own self-serving oligarchy.
This challenge got enormous traction with the rise of modern liberalism and socialist thought. Critics argue that regardless of the state and rules, whether it's birth in Europe's nobility or wealth in a modern plutocracy, the system is set up to exclude the many.
It ensures that the best are simply defined by access and privilege, not by virtue. Wealth grants political dominance, making the system exclusionary by default.
And this leads us right to the contemporary political tension, what the source essay calls the aristocratic worry in modern democracy.
Even in highly democratic societies, this worry persists that uninstructed majorities might make catastrophic, short-sighted decisions.
Like taxing capital to extinction or demanding policies that defy economic or scientific reality.
And we see this worry played out today through our reliance on insulated technocratic bodies and career civil services.
Think about the Federal Reserve in the United States or the European Central Bank. These bodies have immense power over millions of lives.
Yet their members are unelected and insulated from direct popular accountability.
These structures represent a necessary aristocratic impulse.
You can't run a complex modern economy by popular referendum. You need experts, economists, data scientists, legal scholars. That aristocratic element is the necessity of expertise.
But the modern compromise is that this necessary expertise must answer to public accountability. It can't claim the unconditional authority Plato gave his guardians.
So the unelected central banker is necessary to manage monetary policy, but they still have to testify before elected representatives.
The technical merit is accepted, but the legitimacy is conditional.
And this tension is the current battlefield. How do we make sure that the system's designed to inject aristocratic wisdom and stability like an independent judiciary with lifetime tenure or a deeply specialized regulatory agency don't just become untouchable, self-perpetuating oligarchies?
Totally disconnected from the public will.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the structure of modern governments explicitly tries to balance technical merit, the aristocratic impulse, with political legitimacy, the democratic impulse.
And when that balance fails, democracies face a crisis of legitimacy. It's often fueled by the suspicion that the experts are just serving their own class interests, which proves that the ancient critique of oligarchy is still very relevant.
So we've traced the concept from its ancient philosophical roots all the way through its structural integration in modern government. Now for the final step.
And maybe the most important one.
Applying the ethical test provided by the source material, the essay insists that aristocracy has to be evaluated against the golden rule and the aims of a truly just constitution.
The golden rule in this context, it demands reciprocity and impartiality. It asks a really powerful question.
What's that?
Could you rationally accept the standards of rule, even if you knew you would be born into the ruled class, not the ruling class?
So when is aristocracy rationally defensible? The source states it very clearly. It is defensible only if the standards for being best are publicly justifiable, universally understood, and applied impartially to every potential citizen.
Which means merit has to be demonstrable and achievable regardless of your background.
So if a system is a genuine meritocracy, if the selection for the Supreme Court or the high civil service or the Senate is based purely on objective criteria of knowledge, virtue, and character,
Achieved through unbiased processes.
then the system can be rationally defended. It becomes an aristocracy of service, ensuring the best outcome for the entire community.
Conversely, that rational defense collapses immediately when the standards are applied as privileges for birth or wealth.
If the path to the ruling few is significantly easier for the son of a senator than for the daughter of a factory worker, the claim of merit is just fraudulent.
It's a clear violation of equal civic dignity. The rulers are asking the ruled to accept a system of inequality, where the few make decisions for the many based on arbitrary advantages.
A rational defense of aristocracy demands that the system's benefits, like justice and order, be distributed fairly.
And that the opportunity to serve be accessible to all who qualify.
So the wise civic evaluation, then, requires us to constantly assess any aristocratic element in our Constitution, whether it's an unelected board, an upper house, or even the hiring practices for government jobs.
And we have to ask two crucial determining questions.
Question number 1, does this element truly promote justice, the general welfare, and liberty for all citizens? Does it demonstrably elevate the quality of governance for everyone?
And question number 2, or does it instead simply entrench unearned power, violate equal civic dignity, and reinforce the class interests of the few?
The answer to those questions defines whether a system that claims to value merit is a noble aristocracy in practice.
Or merely a selfish oligarchy masquerading behind a respectable name.
So what does this all mean for us today, for you, the citizens? The definition of best isn't just some philosophical exercise.
Not at all. It's an active ethical filter we have to apply to any system that claims meritocracy.
Every time a society selects a leader, an appointed official, or establishes criteria for advancement, it is engaging in the aristocratic question. Who is best suited, and by what metric are we proving it?
We are perpetually in the process of assessing whether our systems truly favor impartial merit, or if we're just giving power to wealth and connections while calling it merit.
And the philosophical and ethical framework from this essay gives us the moral clarity we need to make that distinction effectively. We've covered a tremendous amount of ground today. We've moved from the philosophical purity and rigor of Plato's guardians
Through Aristotle's clear taxonomy that separates true aristocracy from oligarchy by looking at moral intent.
and finally through the modern demand for accountability for all expertise.
The central tension you have to always remember is this. The ideal of rule by merit is powerful. It promises a state guided by wisdom. But its vulnerability to corruption by wealth and birth is absolutely constant. The philosophical defense of aristocracy is only ever as strong as the impartiality and publicly justified standards of its selection process.
The true lesson here is civic vigilance. We as citizens must continually hold the non-elected, insulated parts of our governance systems up to that ethical mirror.
We have to always ask, are the few who rule truly the best, or are they merely the privileged?
That's the question.
We really encourage you to reflect on the relevance of this analysis to contemporary political life. Think about where our modern systems, maybe in the structure of the judiciary, in the operations of the Federal Reserve, or in high-level appointed cabinet positions, intentionally or unintentionally enforce aristocratic elements.
And ask yourself, do those elements meet the ultimate test of impartiality?
Are they serving the common good, or are they just entrenching unearned power for a privileged few? That question is the one we must never stop asking.
This structured approach to complex ideas is essential for being truly well-informed. Click the link on screen for the in-depth summary, subscribe, share, purchase via link, and think rationally.
See the many genre-based podcasts at Mindful Moments. Nourish your mind on the go.